Hey guys, this is Mikko from ML Sound Lab, and today I'm giving you my ultimate guide for guitar tone. So first off, let's go through the disclaimers because obviously this is gonna be a controversial video no matter how good of a job I do. So I'm gonna be using my own logic here. A layman's logic. For example, many people say that love is the most important thing in life. But on the other hand, I know many guys who will never say I love you to their wife, but they will cry on forums about tone wood for days on end. So that means guitar tone is more important than love, which is the most important thing in life. So guitar tone is more important than anything, really. So that's the kind of logic we'll be using here. So it's not 100% serious, but by the end of this video, I think I've collected enough data to give you some kind of a chart or some kind of a graph to explain what really matters the most in guitar tone, and maybe the next time you're investing some money to get your tone better, you'll know where to invest. So first off, I made some limitations to this test. It's grouped in 3 different categories. The first one being guitar, second one being amp, third one being cab, and those are the 3 main categories, and within all of those categories you have 3 subcategories that I'll get into a little bit later. I just want to make it clear what is not a part of this thing. I'm not including tuning, intonation, or scale length of the instrument. I mean, these are things that are subjective. Some people can kind of cope with them, some people cannot. Playing ability is not gear, so it's out. Also, we're not gonna compare a clean amp versus a high gain amp. That's not a fair comparison, and that's a really obvious one. Also, the notorious amp in the room sound will not be a part of this test. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of it. I wouldn't have all this gear if I didn't. Also, you cannot record amp in the room. It's just impossible to do, so in many ways it doesn't matter as far as sharing a guitar tone with other people goes. Okay, let's start off with guitars. So I'm gonna be comparing 2 very different guitars. I'm gonna be using a Stratocaster, a Fender Strat, and a Gibson Les Paul, going through the same amplifier with the same settings and the same cabinet with the same mic up and everything. Okay, so the clean tone sample will probably be one of the biggest differences in this comparison. The clean Fender Strat versus the clean Gibson Les Paul. Different scale lengths, different types of pickups, different tone woods, different everything. But even here, if you consider it's a single coil, I have a Sir single coil on my Strat, and it's a Gibson Les Paul with a Gibson humbucker. With the driven tone, it's actually not that far from each other. So I would say that for cleaner guitar players, the guitar has more importance than for higher gain guitar players. Ooh. One thing to note about this guitar comparison, however, is that we are definitely comparing 2 polar opposites of each other. These guitars have nothing in common, so when people are comparing different guitars that are very similar in their build and construction and everything, and both have humbuckers and everything, that's where the difference gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, let's compare some amplifiers. So we'll be using the same guitar, same cabinet, same mic up, but just going through different amplifiers. Let's have a listen. Okay, based on this comparison, I would say that the guitar amp has a strong control over the overall EQ balance of your guitar tone. Obviously, the EQ section of your guitar amplifier will determine how versatile your guitar tone is, also how many gain stages you have and how tight the low end is and stuff like that. It's all kind of a part of the amplifier. Okay, let's jump into the comparison of the cabinets. Okay, so just like in the guitar comparison, I chose two polar opposites. I chose a 4x12 modern guitar cabinet and a Vox AC30 and compared those two together with a lot of high gain that really emphasizes the cabinets. And you know, so far this is definitely the biggest change in guitar tone that we've heard. Obviously, once again, we're comparing two polar opposites. If we're comparing one 4x12 cabinet to another, both loaded with V30s, and maybe from the same era V30s, then obviously the differences are smaller. Okay, that was just the overall comparison. Let's go more in depth. So let's take the guitar category and divide it up to three subcategories. So we have the electronics, so mainly the pickups. We have the build of the instrument, so tone wood and stuff like that. And thirdly, what I believe is the most important is the actual setup of the guitar. So how fresh are your strings and how properly do you have everything set up for the guitar. Okay, so that was a comparison between two different Stratocasters. One of them has a single coil, the same Sir single coil that I had, and the other one has a humbucker in the bridge, which is a DiMarzio humbucker. So once again, as far as pickups go, that's the polar opposite. You have a single coil versus a humbucker, and with this driven tone, it's not that big of a difference. Obviously, you do hear that one of them is a humbucker and one of them is a single coil, but if you look at the bigger picture, it's actually a surprisingly small difference in my opinion. Okay, let's have a listen to Tone Wood. Okay, this is probably the best tone wood comparison I could find on the internet. This is made by Warmoth, so thank you so much, Warmoth. I kind of borrowed your clip here, only because you did a really good job with this clip. So, even in this clip, we're comparing alder, swamp ash, and mahogany bodies to each other with a semi-driven guitar tone on a single coil, kind of a telly style guitar. The body was not finished, so it's just bare wood body, meaning that this will really emphasize the sound of the guitar body. And you know, the differences definitely are subtle. You can definitely hear them, but they are subtle. How much they matter will obviously be your opinion. Once again, I would say that maybe for clean guitar players it'll matter more than for driven guitar players, but once again, the body was not even finished, so this definitely emphasizes the tone wood character. Okay, let's jump into the third and final subcategory of the guitar-related tone comparisons. This is mainly super old strings versus brand new strings. Let's have a listen. Okay, so this was really interesting. When comparing the old strings versus the new strings, the palm mutes are completely dead, there's no sustain and there's no low end focus on the really old strings with the bad setup guitar, versus the really new strings and the good setup. you had tons of sustain and a really focused low end. But once again, in the scheme of things, I'm not sure how big of a difference this will be. Okay, now that we're talking about the amplifier, let's go through the subcategories. So we have tubes, we have the power amp, and we have the preamp. Let's start a comparison between which of these really matters the most. Okay, so that's a complete retube of the same amplifier and then biased correctly. And I have to say, I'm very disappointed if I just spent that money on new tubes and that was the difference that I got. Let's just say that. Okay, let's jump into the next comparison, which will be different preamps versus each other. This will be a JCM 800 versus a rectifier preamp section. Let's have a listen. Okay, based on this comparison, I would say that the preamp section of your amplifier is the most important part of your amplifier. Obviously, if you're comparing a power amp that's driving the EL34s, like a British style amplifier, versus something like a 6L6 powered rectifier that I have here, then you're never gonna drive the tubes that hard. So that's the use case difference between those amplifiers. So obviously the power amp also has a big emphasis, but you use it very differently based on the amplifier. Okay, let's go through the cabinet section and the three subcategories. We have the size of the cabinet, we have the speaker type, and we have the mic up. These are the three main categories that I came up with. Let's compare the size of the cabinet. Okay, once again, we're comparing two polar opposites, a combo amplifier and a 4x12. This is probably the biggest difference in tone that we've had yet. Obviously, I would have bias towards this, but this is just how it is. Once again, we're not comparing two different 4x12s with the same kind of speaker type in them, which brings us to that comparison. So let's compare a 4x12 with different speakers in it. Let's have a listen. Okay, so this comparison was the same mic, a 57, in the same position, on the same exact cabinet, just swapping out different speakers. We were just comparing different preamps of the amplifier, and that was a much more subtle difference than what we're getting here. How much do guitar speakers actually mean in your guitar tone? A lot. Okay, let's compare just the mic up. So we're comparing the same exact signal chain, nothing has changed apart from the different mic that we're using. You can definitely hear that the difference is crazy big. It's a bigger difference than the clean sample of a Fender Strat versus a Gibson Les Paul, which would actually be the biggest difference anyone would ever suggest you can make in a guitar tone. So let's go a little bit deeper into this. If we did all these tests on a clean guitar tone, we would probably have different results. Then again, if we did all these tests on a high gain tone, we would have different end results once again. So I'm thinking if you are a clean guitar player, you will have a different emphasis on where the tone matters. And once again, if you are kind of a crunch driven or high gain guitar player, then you will have more emphasis on different parts of the guitar tone. And what I'm really talking about here is pre-EQ versus post-EQ. Not sure if you are familiar with these terms, but pre-EQ is the EQ balance of your guitar and the volume of your guitar actually going into the amplifier, and post EQ is the cabinet, the speaker, the mic up. And once you have a lot of gain, the post EQ will be much more stronger, versus if you're using a clean tone, then the post EQ is not that important because you're not saturating that many frequencies. The post EQ does the same thing, but it's not that strong sounding. So I will kind of have different recommendations for clean guitar players, and then I will have a different recommendation for the guitar players that use gain. I think edge of breakup guitar tones are the in-between. If you're already using like a Marshall crunchy sound, then you are in the high gain category. That's where post EQ will be very strong for you and will matter more. So here are the graphs that I came up with. This is for clean guitar players. So for clean guitar players, the emphasis on the guitar becomes much bigger. Also, you can use the amplifier to save a bad guitar, so the amplifier is more important as well. Post EQ is doing the same thing that it's doing for driven guitar tones, but because you're not exciting that many frequencies and not saturating that much, you will not hear as big of a difference. However, if we're talking about driven tones, crunch tones, high gain tones, or metal tones, you will be saturating the amp and your guitar tone so much that the post EQ becomes much more important. And I would go as far as to say, for metal players, the cab, speaker, and mic up is your tone, and everything else before that is shaping the character and the dynamics of that tone. But the tone and how everything sounds is a big part, just the cabinet. Whether you're a clean guitar player or a driven guitar player, taking care of all these subcategories is really important for you to maximize your guitar tone. Thank you so much for watching the video, and stay tuned for more. Subscribe. Bye bye.